Hi and welcome to Crab Recap. Today, I will tell you about a movie called Paul. The movie begins in 1947, inside a house in Wyoming. A peculiar orange glow can be seen through the house's windows and door cracks. The household's dog named Paul paws at the door, then a young girl lets him out, figuring that he wants to relieve himself outside. However, Paul runs to the yard and stops, looking up to the mysterious source of the orange glow. The girl also heads outside, and she seems shocked at the orange glow and its source. Fast forward to recent years, two best friends from the UK named Clive Gollings and Graham Willey are enjoying themselves at the famous San Diego Comic Con. They return to their hotel room at the end of the day with their full shopping bags. Their next itinerary is to do a road trip visiting famous UFO sites across the US. They'll go from Area 51 and the Black Mailbox to Camp Verde and the Apache Junction before ending at New Mexico to the historical Roswell UFO crash site. The next morning, the duo finally get their rented RV and begin their journey. Along the way, they stop at a restaurant and bar in Nevada that's themed after aliens and UFOs. The server, Pat, asks about their time in Comic-Con, and they also talk about aliens. When Clive goes to the bathroom, two men enter the bar. They get upset when Graham laughs at their joke, and when his alien-themed drink arrives, they laugh at Graham and Clive for being alien geeks. The best friends hurry out of the bar in hopes of never seeing the scary men again, but when Clive backs up the RV, he hits the men's truck and causes a big dent. They drive away regardless. After arriving at the Black Mailbox and taking pictures, the two see a car from afar. They quickly run to the RV because they think it must be the two strange guys in the bar. They speed away, but the car suddenly flips over and tumbles several times as it goes by their RV. It bounces across the road and slides to a stop on its roof. The RV stops when it gets close to the wrecked car. Graham and Clive walk up to the burning car, but no one is inside. Graham decides to call for help, but a man's voice comes from behind them before he can do so. Still not sure what's going on, the person stands up and walks into the light. The person turns out to be an alien wearing shorts and sandals, causing Clive to pass out and Graham to accuse the alien for knocking out his friend. The alien tells Graham to calm down and introduces himself as Paul. He doesn't want to hurt the two men, instead wanting Graham to help him drag Clive back to the RV and that he'll explain everything on their way. Graham takes the wheel and they drive off, with Paul instructing him to drive north. Meanwhile, at the crash site, a government agent in a suit named Zoil leaves a sedan. He inspects a wet spot in an unconventional way and reports to his superior that Paul has escaped with the help of others. His superior wants to send backup to help him catch Paul, but he says he can handle this himself. After hours on the road, Clive finally regains his consciousness. He sees Paul walking out the RV bathroom and sitting next to Graham, so he strangles Paul while speaking in Klingon from the Star Wars franchise. Graham tries to calm Clive down and explains that Paul comes from a planet in the Andromeda Galaxy. Clive continues to strangle Paul when they come across a roadblock in front of them. Paul disappears before two agents working for the same woman as Zoil stop their RV. One agent named O'Reilly enters the RV to go through their stuff, while the other agent, Haggard, questions Clive and Graham outside. They find nothing suspicious with the British men or their RV, so the agents let them go. When they're back on the road, Paul suddenly reappears in the RV, surprising Clive and Graham. The sound of tires screeching gets the attention of the agents. In the distance, they see the RV swerve across the road before correcting its course again. Zoil meets up with the two agents the next morning who tell him about the mission at hand. Their incompetence makes Zoil angry, so he tells them to keep following the RV and also Clive and Graham. Meanwhile, at a gas station, said British tourists are stopping to get some food. When walking into the store, they notice a police car pulling up, so they try to look as casual as possible. At the cashier, the policeman casually asks them about their RV and where they're from. They manage to answer awkwardly before returning to the RV and leaving again. On the road, Clive complains about not even knowing where they're going or why they should follow Paul's instruction. Paul says it's better for the Brits to know less for plausible deniability. Suddenly, the window is hit by something. Everyone jumps, and Graham stops the RV. A dead bird is lying on the road. Paul takes the bird in his hands and uses his powers to bring it back to life, which amazes Clive and Graham. However, Paul immediately eats the bird alive, negating their amazement. Back in the RV, Graham is drawing Paul when he asks if Paul had ever used his power on humans. Paul says he only ever healed injured or sick humans, because bringing a human back to life would be dangerous since it can backfire and hurt him instead. They decide to spend the night at an RV park. Upon arriving, they are greeted by the owner's daughter Ruth, whose glasses are half tinted. She admits them to the RV and asks to hold one of the guy's passports. Graham seems to be enamored by her. The men and Paul spend their night drinking beer and barbecuing while talking about various things. Paul says that he has been alive for 60 years. Paul first came to Earth on a science mission, but all of a a sudden, his ship stopped working and he crashed in the middle of a field in Wyoming. Paul was helped out of the wreck by a little girl named Tara. Then a group of soldiers showed up and took him away. Meanwhile, Ruth notices there are 3 people in the crew. However, her father calls her inside before she can see Paul. The next day, Ruth knocks on the RV door, waking up the crew. They tell Paul to hide in the bathroom while they open the door. Ruth wants to come in and asks where the 3rd person is, so Paul responds to her from inside the bathroom. It turns out that Ruth is a hardline Christian, and she gets into a debate with Paul about evolution. Paul is pissed off and decides to show himself to Ruth only to prove his point about evolution. Of course, she faints upon seeing him, and the men debate about what to do with her. They finally decide to take her with them, so they convince her to be on their side. But they can't leave the RV park without Clive's passport, so Paul uses his invisibility power to grab the passport from inside Ruth's house, but he gets found out by her father, Moses. Paul runs away with the passport while evading gunshots, safely returning to the RV. Ruth eventually wakes up, but she still hasn't come to terms with Paul's existence. She keeps calling him a monster and begins praying. Meanwhile, Zoil and his men go to the gas station to question the police officer and the teller. Zoil goes back to his car and tells his boss what happened. No matter what, she tells Zoil to retrieve Paul as soon as possible. So following the trail, Zoil goes to the RV park to talk to Moses. Moses says that Ruth was taken by a demon and gives them a picture of young Ruth as reference to find her. Zoil leaves with his men, still not telling them about what they're looking for in this mission. As they leave, Moses picks up their conversation on a radio scanner and decides to find Ruth himself, armed with his shotgun. Back in the RV, while Ruth and Graham talk outside, Paul and Clive manage to become friendly by ironing out some misunderstandings. Outside, Ruth is having a revelation about the universe and losing her religion, even kissing and groping Graham. After Graham tells her to calm down and explore her new world slowly, they return to the RV. Paul chooses to treat Ruth's eye with his power, so Ruth starts to trust Paul and his friends. They decide to stop by a busy bar at night. In the back, Ruth calls her dad on the payphone. However, it's Zoil who answers the phone. He wants her to tell him where Paul and the others are heading, but she refuses. Unfortunately, the agents manage to ping her location and she hangs up. She is then harassed by the 2 men whose truck was wrecked by the RV. This causes a bar fight to happen, and Ruth even meets Moses, who is surprised about her healed eye before getting hit and fainting. The 3 runs back to the RV, and Paul shows himself to the truckers, causing them to pass out. They drive away as they hear police sirens approaching. In order to shake off the agent's trail, the crew decides to get off the road and spend the night around a campfire. Paul thinks back to the night of his spaceship's crash, which was 60 years ago. Paul was the first English word he knew when he killed Tara's dog by mistake. Paul feels bad about what he did to Tara, but he never gets to say sorry. Paul reveals that he is being chased by the government because they need his brain and some multipotent stem cells for more secret projects. Early the next morning, Graham and Clive walk down the busy main street. Paul is in the middle of them. He is wearing the little cowboy suit from the store window, and his hat is pulled low over his face. For his plan to leave Earth, they need to get some fireworks. Meanwhile, Zoil and his men are still looking for the group, and Moses is also looking for them by himself to try to save his daughter. Paul can eventually go back to Tara's farm to say sorry for killing her dog Paul in 1947. After being made fun of her whole life for what she said she saw, Tara seems pleased to see that Paul is just a person. She turns on the gas stove to make tea, but Haggard and O'Reilly arrive, accidentally shooting the house's gas pipes on one side of the house and Zoil on the other side to catch the crew. As the crew runs away with Tara in their car, Moses also arrives to take Ruth home, despite her telling him to just go home. O'Reilly fires at them, setting off the gas and destroying the house alongside himself. The agents and Moses move quickly to follow the RV. Haggard, on the other hand, drives off a cliff and dies, so Zoil goes after him. Zoil tells his boss that he'll have Paul in an hour, but she gets impatient and tells Zoil that she's ordered a military response, which forces Zoil to shoot his radio dead so he can continue his pursuit. Paul and the crew finally arrive at the meeting place for Paul's rescue, so they use fireworks to send a message and then wait. They see some strange orange lights above the trees, and everyone thought it was Paul's spaceship. Unfortunately, it turns out to be an army helicopter with Zoil's mysterious boss, the big guy, on board. Zoil shows up just as she and 3 other soldiers are about to shoot Paul. It turns out that he's actually Paul's insider who helped him run away. Zoil breaks the soldier's weapons, but he gets hit in the shoulder. The big guy gets punched out by Tara. Moses then shows up with a shotgun and kills Graham. Paul desperately tries to heal Graham back from the dead, but he ends up passing out from being too tired. The others crowd around his lifeless body that is lying on the grass for a moment. Fortunately, Paul regains his consciousness and stands up. When the alien ship finally shows up, Paul prepares to leave, but he wants Tara to come with him so she can live a better life. Paul says goodbye to his friends one last time before disappearing into space. The movie ends 2 years later, when Graham, Clive, and Ruth are seen at San Diego Comic-Con to support Paul, their popular new comic book. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Write your opinion about the movie in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos.